Welcome to The Explainer. So let's just dive right into it. Today, we're unpacking a really thought-provoking article by policy strategist and author Oluyomi Ola-David. It's called Jailbreaks from Underdevelopment. And, instead of giving us this dry academic lecture on post-colonial economics, she uses this striking, almost cinematic metaphor to explain the really complex economic realities of developing nations. She absolutely grabs your attention right from the first line, and she uses that momentum to deliver a powerful message about responsibility and true freedom. Section 1. The jailbreak metaphor and the illusion of freedom.
Right, so before she even mentions economics, politics, or developing nations, she sets up the foundation by asking us to picture a very specific, high-stakes scenario. She asks directly, have you ever seen the footage of a jailbreak? I mean, whether you've seen it in a Hollywood movie or on the evening news, you instantly know the exact scene she's talking about. It's that pulse-pounding moment of escape. She uses this to immediately hook us into our narrative, getting us to recall the sheer adrenaline and the apparent victory of that exact moment.
Her exact phrasing here is just incredibly vivid. She notes that these temporarily successful prisoners display the energies of the brave and the determination of the free. But honestly, the most striking part is how she describes their faces. She says they wear the delectable smiles of grand architects of a new future. Just picture that for a second. It's the ultimate feeling of triumph, right? They really believe they've completely rewritten their destinies and engineered a permanent escape from their confinement.
But reality eventually bites back, doesn't it? This really illustrates the core conflict of her piece. She contrasts these momentary heroes, the folks briefly celebrating at their prison independence parties, with the distressing chores they inevitably return to. Because, as she writes, by the unflinching and intelligent forces of a just state, these escapees are recaptured. The grand illusion just shatters. The triumphant architects of a new future are marched right back into the isolation and distressing chores they wrongly assumed were over forever. So the escape was loud, but the recapture is silent and absolute. Moving on to Section 2, the re-imprisonment jinx and the reality of nation building. So now, shifting this analogy onto the global stage, we encounter what she calls the re-imprisonment jinx. Now, she isn't actually talking about physical prisons anymore. She's talking about the trajectory of entire nations. She defines this as the grim socioeconomic reality for many nation-states who once gained independence from their colonial masters. They had their big prison break. But she argues that without something deeper, they fall right back into economic dependence and mental slavery. Political independence, literally just the lowering of one flag and the raising of another, doesn't automatically guarantee true economic freedom. Just like that escaped prisoner who eventually gets caught, these nations find themselves trapped all over again by the perils of underdevelopment. Listen to this really powerful quote she provides. Away from the pomp and pageantry of national independence is the subtle reality that sustainable economic freedom is birthed by absolute, individual, and collective responsibility. Notice how she completely contrasts the loud pomp and pageantry, the parades, the celebrations, all those speeches, with the quiet, subtle, but absolutely necessary work of responsibility. The parade is just the jailbreak. The actual freedom, well, that requires incredibly hard work.
Section 3. True economic freedom and breaking the jinx.
So, if the post-colonial world is caught in this devastating cycle of mental slavery and economic dependence, how do we actually break the jinx? Well, she reiterates her central thesis to answer that. A mere jailbreak from colonial masters is incredibly fleeting without a firm foundation of absolute responsibility. A political prison break is really nothing more than a temporary illusion if those deeper socioeconomic realities are just ignored. You can't just declare yourself free and expect the whole architecture of your society to magically transform overnight. You actually have to build the new foundation yourself, stone by stone. And that brings us to Section 4, absolute responsibility and collective action. In the final part of her article, she lays out exactly who needs to take this action. And spoiler alert, it's not just the politicians sitting in government offices. Let's walk through these 5 escalating levels she maps out. She basically mandates that we can no longer be at ease with underdevelopment at any of these stages. It starts at level 1, the individual. From there, it scales up to the household. Then it moves up to the corporate level, our businesses and industries. Only then does it reach the national level, and finally the global stage. She's effectively saying, look, you cannot have a developed nation made up of underdeveloped households. You cannot have a thriving global presence if your corporate sector is economically dependent. The responsibility is absolute, and it applies to every single tier of society. But despite all the heavy realities she outlines, it is so important to highlight her underlying optimism here.
She firmly believes that wholesome and sustainable development is absolutely possible. She isn't writing this to be cynical or to say that developing nations are just doomed to this endless cycle of recapture. Quite the opposite, actually. She believes real transformation is entirely achievable, but only if we face reality and step up to her call to action. The jinx can be broken permanently, not by some chaotic jailbreak, but by deliberate, responsible building.
And that brings us to our final thought. I really want to end this explainer with a provocative question inspired directly by her concluding thoughts. If wholesome and sustainable development is indeed possible, are you taking the absolute responsibility required to achieve it at your level, whether that's individual, household, or corporate? Because true freedom isn't just an event you celebrate once, it's a responsibility you wake up and practice every single day. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep reflecting on what your role is in building a sustainable future.